Welcome, in front of me I have the Samsung Galaxy Tab S9 Plus, and today I'll go over unboxing along with a quick look at the device itself. So anyway, let's get straight into it. Actually, I won't need a knife apparently. Now, before I actually pop it open, probably based on the size, you can see that there is not much in that package apart from the tablet and the pen and maybe a cable. Anyway, here we have our device. Well, that's not necessarily how I wanted to open it, but I guess it still works. I'm gonna boot it up straight away just so it can start to turn on and then do the reset and whatever else is gonna pop up. It's Samsung after all. Anyway, down here we have our pen, which comes included with the device, unlike Apple. We get the cable, which you can see just, there we go, here. I'm not even gonna open it up, it's a Type-C to Type-C. And then we get booklets and just instructions and all that crap. So that's basically it. So let's just leave that to the side and focus on the device itself. Now I'm gonna start going through the setup and get annoyed, so bear with me. Whatever, doesn't really matter what I select right here. Restart, because selecting region needs to be resetted. Cool. So while it's restarting for no apparent reason, I'm going to quickly go into the screen specs. So this is a 12.4 inch display. It's a 1752 pixels by 2800. It is also a dynamic AMOLED display with 120 Hz refresh rate and HDR10 Plus certification. Additionally, it has 84.3% screen to body ratio with pixel density of 266. Which, put in simple terms, the display right here is pretty damn good. Now, if it would turn on a little bit quicker like a flagship should, that would be even better. So while it's loading something up, let's flip it over to the back, where we have a dual camera setup. Now the main sensor is a 13 megapixel wide sensor, and then below that we have a 8 megapixel ultra wide. Now with these cameras you can shoot at 4K 30 frames or 1080p 30 frames. Unfortunately no 60. And then at the front we have a selfie camera, and that is a 12 megapixel ultra wide with a field of view of 120 degrees. And again, 4K 30, 1080p 30. And while it's still doing whatever, we can now move over to the internals. So starting off with the battery, we have a 10,000 mAh battery, or more precisely 10,090, but that 90 doesn't really matter that much. So yeah, basically 10K battery. Also comes with a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, which is basically, I think, the newest processor at the moment. Now when it comes down to the storages, we have at the very lowest end of this device 256 gigs of storage with 12 gigs of RAM, which is as a lowest end spec. This is pretty highly spec'd, to be honest. Just to put that in perspective, this is basically also what, for instance, Fold comes with, the Samsung Fold, and most actual higher end spec flagships. Now if you want to, you can also go up to half a terabyte, 512 gigs of RAM, and also 12 gigs of 512 gigs of storage. That's what I meant to say, and 12 gigs of RAM. So the specs right here, at least for the storages and RAM, are pretty damn good. So you shouldn't be running out of the storage anytime soon. The lowest end 256 is still a decent amount of storage, and obviously you can spec it out higher to half a terabyte, and in that case you should be just good to go for even longer period of time. And additionally, obviously if you need it, you can have something like this little thing, pop an SD card into this, plug it in, and have pseudo expandable storage that you just plug in when you need it. I'm gonna skip this. So moving on, I did touch up on the battery size, and now the charging speed right here caps at 45 watts. Now unfortunately we don't get a charger in the box, so that's a little bit of a shame, considering this device comes at about $1,000, so you would like to see something like that, considering the devices are exponentially growing in price, yet they give you less and less in the package. So yeah, it's a little bit of a shame, considering it costs $1,000 freaking and doesn't come even with a charger. Only Samsung and Apple can pull that shit off. So yeah, anyway. So with that being said, you will need to most likely buy a separate charger for this to actually charge it at its full speed. Unless you already have a better charger at like 45 watts or anything better than that, then you should be good to go. You don't need to buy a new charger, you can just use that one. Now, continuing on with the specs, we have under display a fingerprint sensor, we have accelerometer, gyroscope, proximity compass, and all that crap. We also have DeX in here that you don't need to plug in a monitor to actually utilize. So there we go, we can just toggle that on. It's basically kind of like a desktop mode. So I'm gonna actually start it up. And anything else worth saying here? Oh, right, Android. It's running on Android 13, One UI 5.1. So possibly, or most likely, it's going to get an update to Android 14 once that's available, because these devices do have, what is it, like 2 years updates, so you should be getting Android 14 and maybe even 15 possibly, but that's like way in the future. So there we go, that's the device. Now, with that being said, let's just quickly touch upon the pros and the cons, and I'm going to start with the pros. So the Pro right here will be the display. It's a AMOLED display, 120 Hz refresh rate with a pretty high resolution. That's first very good thing, considering you will be most likely looking at this screen for every time you actually use it, so that's good. Con or Pro, included pen for free. Well, technically you pay for it, but it comes with the device. You don't need to like go out of your way to get a pen, kind of like you do with an Apple product. The charging speed right here is pretty good, which is also a pro. The battery size, again, 10,000 milliamps is massive battery cell in here, which again is a pro. And the lowest spec model is again pretty damn well spec'd out with 12 gigs of RAM, which will mean that you shouldn't ever think about getting any kind of like higher end, if there even was, because 12 gigs of RAM is basically as much as people have on their Windows computers. And additionally, the 256 gigabytes of storage built in is a good starting point, so there we go. Now into cons. The price tag obviously will be the first one, considering this is a very expensive device that doesn't come with a charger, which leads me to the point 2. No included charger. Now, just to kind of go over it for people that want to argue that they're trying to prevent, e-waste and crap like that, if they really wanted to prevent just kind of pollution and stuff like that, how about not producing dogshit devices every single year? Just make one good one every 3 years. And that's how often people upgrade their devices anyway, so we don't need a new Samsung tablet every single freaking year. So that would probably solve a lot of the pollution, not including a charger. Charger doesn't really compound to that pollution all that much. Now, continuing on, the cameras right here are a little bit on the lower end, but I don't think I can consider, actually, yeah, I'm not going to consider this as a con, considering this is a tablet and no one will be running around with a 12-inch display taking photos, so I take that back. And one thing that I don't always, or never liked, is the fact that Samsung devices, at least the higher end ones, don't come with any kind of expandable storage. Now, I'm not exactly sure why. The lower ones do, the higher ones don't. So the more you pay, the less you get. It boggles the mind of me, or why that is even like acceptable. Now I do understand that I'm coming from like way back in the day where most devices came with storages, but expendable one, more precisely. But like, for God's sakes, it costs $1,000. It has enough space here to reduce that 90 milliamp hour battery and just add a freaking SD card. And obviously that would allow people to maybe, instead of going for 512 gigabytes of storage, go for the 250 and then slap in a terabyte of SD card, which would have been significantly better and would serve a better purpose, considering this device has functionality to work kind of like a computer would, with the DeX support, mouse, keyboard and all that stuff, and even cases that add these things at mouse and keyboard. So having expandable storage that you could just pop in SD card and install stuff on it and store like a computer would be a logical decision. And if something would happen with your device, you can always take it out. So I consider this to be, and at least in my book, a con right here. I don't like to not see this, especially on something that is supposedly being sold as a kind of like a pro device for creativity and also kind of like a computer, pseudo computer. In both cases, I would want to be able to move data easily over from one to another location by just taking out an SD card. So there we go. Now, not very many cons, to be honest. The device itself is well made. After all, it costs $1,000, so you'd expect it. But I still wanted to put something in there just so it doesn't feel like the device is perfect without any kind of like drawbacks. Because to be honest, it's not. For $1,000, it's an expensive device that still has drawbacks. It's just that in general, Samsung produces relatively decent devices. They have really good UI for them as well. So yeah, not much problem here, to be honest. But as a person that has been using Samsung phone for past over a year now, I do have some gripes with it, like the specifically the OS, how it works. And I might be in the minority, but it just kind of bugs me over the time. It compounds to like the frustration that I have. And for $1,000, or at least in my case a little bit more, it gets kind of annoying that you paid so much money and you have certain drawbacks that I believe at this price range shouldn't be here. The device is, like I said, at its core, really good device, fast, will do everything that you need to throw at it. It just has a little bit of Samsung flavor to it, if that makes sense. Now, anyway, with this being said, hopefully you found this video helpful, informative, and if you did, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.